Hey guys, this is Melissa with Love Card Life. This is part 2 in my series on my story. Last video was my journey to Christian Universalism. This video is my journey to Christian Mysticism. In this video, I'm going to share with you my journey of looking for and finding God. When I was a child, my favorite Bible verse was Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and find me when you seek for me with all your heart. In my last video, I shared how I was born with memories of a light and love that I did not understand. The memories are too difficult to put into words, and even as an adult with 34 years, to think about how to verbalize these things, I just find that it's very, very difficult because there are no words to describe the things that I remember. But because I want you to feel the depth of the journey I'm going to take you on in this video, I am going to give this my best attempt. Fair warning, this might be really weird for some of you, and if you don't like it, that is okay. Close your eyes and imagine with me. You are out somewhere in space surrounded by darkness. Complete darkness. Not a threatening darkness, but a peaceful and comforting darkness. And off in the distance, there is a light. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. And the light is music. It sings of love and peace and perfection and safety. Love that you never dared to believe could exist and still aren't sure that you do. The light is moving towards you, and as it gets closer, it grows and it grows until you can clearly see that it is the size of a universe. It is made up of trillions upon trillions of individual lights, shimmering rainbow colors like diamonds, all moving in perfect unison like a school of fish or a flock of birds, flowering open before you. Each light sings its own note in the grand universal symphony, and the attention of each of them is directed fully at you. The light beckons you, it draws you, it sings to you. You enter entranced, and as you approach the heart of the light, it thickens and intensifies. The music increases in frequency. Surrounding you is a cosmic storm of pure brilliance, brighter than 1,000,000 suns, and yet it does not blind or burn you. Pure, unbridled force of raw bliss and love in the most holy sense of the word. Swirling columns of light moving up and down within the great lights, like hurricanes within hurricanes. And as the bliss within the lights and the intensity of the pure, uninhibited power continues to build, you think that it will destroy you, but when it engulfs you, you find that it is as gentle as a mother's love for her newborn child. You find yourself sinking into an infinite ocean of love and possibility and stillness. The light becomes your entire awareness, and you find that you can hear the heart of the song more clearly, and it is as a warm, deep voice powerfully laughing, and the laughter is the creation of the universe. And you are completely overwhelmed with the experiential knowledge that all is good and always has been good and always will be good. You are engulfed in a comfort and a security so deep that you could rest for thousands of lifetimes and never want to leave. This is what I can say about it now after 34 years to reflect and dig for the proper words. If you're still with me at this point, I applaud you because, to be honest, this part of my story turns most people off. When I was born here, and this is when I was a baby, I still had a very strong connection to the light. I remember the world being brilliant. I just felt this connection between everything, and I felt that love and that light that I knew was flowing to me through my parents' arms when they held me, and the singing of the birds and the sun and the wind and the trees, especially the trees. But as time went on, this experience of the world faded. My memories remained in my subconscious mind as impressions of things that I didn't even understand, let alone know how to describe, but they were the most real everything about me, like fingerprints on my soul. Last time I talked about how my dad taught me the names of God in Hebrew when I was about 5, and how the name that stood out the most to me was El Shaddai, and how my dad taught me that it meant Almighty God, or God who is more than enough. I knew this Almighty God. This God who is more than enough must be what I was remembering and what I was missing. At night, I would stand outside under the starry sky, wishing that I could fall into the sky and go see this God for myself. As the years went on, I became very depressed and even suicidal at times. In the previous video, I shared the reasons for this, how what I had been taught about God in the church environment I was raised in was devastating to the developing mind of a child. I developed a whole host of mental and emotional issues that would go on to cripple me in so many areas of my life, specifically in relationships. However, even during the darkest times of my life, I still talk to God. I talk to God every day, almost as an ongoing process, because my mom taught me the Bible verse when I was very young, pray without ceasing, and I took that literally. And I also was fascinated by the Bible passage that talked about Enoch, where it said Enoch walked with God and God took him. And I wanted to be one of those people that walked with God. I heard God's voice in my heart regularly. And as time went on and I began to grow and mature, I began to realize that the voice of God that spoke in my heart was very different than the God I was taught about in church. For instance, when I was 14, God clearly told me that if I wanted to move forward with Him, I had to forgive everybody involved in my past. And I remember thinking, this God isn't anything like what I was taught about in church, because this God wants me to forgive those who hurt me, which means He understands who they are and why they did what they did in the same way that He understands me. I dreamed about the light consistently over the years. Sometimes I dreamed that the sky opened up and light and music floated down to me, and I could still hear this music when I would wake up. One night I dreamed that I was in the passenger seat of my car with my sister, and we were driving down a wooded road, and we came to a clearing off on the right, which is outside of my window, and in the clearing I saw the light. It was there hovering just above the ground, and I yelled at my sister to stop the car, and she was so confused, but I just opened the door and I was out. I was going to the light, and then, of course, before I reached the light, I woke up. And I was devastated. I remember as I was laying there in bed, I resolved that I would walk around the world barefoot and hungry until I found the mountain where God came down. There's this Bible passage in the Old Testament that talks about God coming down on the top of Mount Horeb. And at that time in my life, I must have been around the age of 13 or 14, I don't know exactly, but I was obsessed with it. I share all of this just to highlight the fact to you that when I say that from the time I can remember, I've been completely driven and motivated by finding God. It's been my soul life's purpose. I want you to understand, those aren't just words. This is what I cared about. I remembered what I lost. And I read in Jeremiah that those who seek God will find Him. So I assumed that I can find God somewhere in this world. And I was determined to do that. And while I didn't walk barefoot and hungry around the world and climb to the tops of mountains in my search for God, I did what I could as somebody who is still living as a minor at home. I went out in crazy weather. I went out in blizzards. I went out in thunderstorms. I walked barefoot in the snow. I tried to put myself in these extreme environments where I thought I could trigger some type of spiritual experience. I never found the light in physical form in this world, but one night around the age of 18 or 19, I did have an experience. One night I was lying in bed. I was not yet asleep. I was fully awake, but my eyes were closed, and suddenly I was in an ocean of love. This was the love from my memories. And this was the love that it's not something we experience in this world. It completely captivates your mind and attention. It is all of your awareness. I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this experience in another video, but just sum it up to say that I experienced the love and light of my memories in a very, very profound way. And I was shown a lot of things, most of which I cannot remember now, but there are a few that I can, and I'll share this in another video that's just dedicated to this topic. It took me a decade to integrate this experience. I didn't understand the lessons that it was trying to teach me right away, but being reunited with the love that I had been searching for my entire life spurred me on to leave the church I had been raised in, and when I was 19 years old, to go seek experiences of God at a non-denominational charismatic church in my area. I was intent on recreating what I had experienced in my spiritually transformative experience, as they're called. And let me tell you, I found experiences, nothing that matched what I had felt that night in my bed when I was swimming in the ocean of love, but I found miraculous healings and supernatural experiences of God's presence. Week after week, multiple times a week sometimes, I was back there like a drug addict looking for my next high. Because during the experience, I felt that connection with God, and then, or some semblance of it, enough to satisfy me and keep me coming back. But then as soon as it was over, the experience was gone. I didn't feel anything anymore. For 4 years, my life revolved around this church. And then I met my husband when I was 21, and when I was 22, I ended up moving across country to start a new life with him. No offense to anybody who attends a church in my area, I personally could not find anything to recreate those experiences that I was so desperately seeking. And this was the only time in my life that I shut down my connection with God. I was so disillusioned after years of seeking to either come up empty or have a temporary experience of God that would just fade as soon as the experience was over, that I started to convince myself it was all a lie. I'll spare you all the details because I spell them out in part 1 of my story, but life brought me to my breaking point. And this breaking point triggered a spiritual awakening, which, to be completely honest, is still unfolding, and I assume will be for the rest of my life. So far, there have been 3 stages to my awakening. Stage 1 happened when, as I related in part 1 of my story, I began reading near-death experience stories. And I found thousands, millions, they say, of other people who have had similar stories and memories to my own. And in reading hundreds of other accounts similar to my own, I began to put the logical pieces of the puzzle together and to conceptually understand that God is literally love. They're the same thing. Love is our experience of the divine. And that God, or love, literally makes up the universe because everything came from God. So conceptually, I began to understand that I never left God. That what I was remembering, trying so hard to find, is right here, surrounding me and within me. And this is what Jesus meant when he said, the kingdom of heaven is here, and it is within us. And I was high on this knowledge for months. The whole world came alive to me, and I began to see things differently. However, at this point, it was still a conceptual understanding, and I hadn't yet translated it practically within myself and into my life. And I was still very much in bondage to unhealthy mental and emotional and behavioral patterns that were destructive in many ways to my life and my relationships. Stage 2 happened when my destructive emotional and relational patterns led to yet another depression and more devastating loss in my life. And I got to the point where I just had enough of it. I said, this is it. I'm not living this way. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to change. And I said, if God is love and the whole world is love and I am love, then I should be living an experience of love. So I made the radical decision that I'm not going to think another thought that is not loving, joyful, and peaceful about myself, my life, the world, or any of the people in my life. And I'm not kidding. In 4 days, I was experiencing out of this world bliss. So I'd say for a good 2 years, I was high on love, and I mean high. Nothing could get me down. All my relational issues melted away. I didn't need anything from anyone because I had it all in here. I wasn't afraid of anything. Everything that I had been afraid of doing before, like speaking on stage, I found myself doing just because I could. And I was living the good life, even though nothing in my life circumstances had changed. My entire perception had changed. My life was heaven. And then as time went on, I began to let some of my thoughts slip. I faced some very challenging things in my life. This was last summer now that this started happening, that some fears and anxieties began slipping back in. And I found myself very slowly, little by little, beginning to lose touch with that experience of heaven. And the only way I knew to get it back was to do hardcore mind work, which is necessary and so important for long-term change. But I had no idea that there was a much quicker and simpler way to access that love, to bypass the mind and go straight to the heart. Stage 3 began only recently, actually. On his YouTube channel, Aaron Abke held what he called the Remember I Am Challenge. And with this challenge, he offered a free meditation, which we were to do every morning. And in this meditation, he would ask questions like, how do you know you're aware? Go to that place now. How do you know you exist? Go to that place now. And then he would say, hold on to this sense of I am and focus your attention on it for the rest of the meditation. And what this meditation did for me was really help me to get past my mind, get past my ego and my thoughts and my identity and all of that stuff, and find the pure awareness within. At first, as I did these meditations, I found it difficult to turn my mind off, and I still do, to be honest. But what I'm finding is that the more I do them, I can just snap into this state of I am awareness, as he calls it, easier and easier as the days go by. And very quickly, as I began to reach this deeper state of awareness in my meditations, I began to recognize it as the light from my memories. And some of you may say, well, how is that possible? Did you see a light? Well, one thing that's hard, very hard to describe, is when you have experiences in these other realms. A lot of times it's not visual. It's something that's far beyond and far deeper than our five senses. And so there isn't a visual that goes with my experience. And when you experience light, it's not a visual of seeing a light. It's experiencing what light actually is. And I began to have that experience, and I began to recognize that light is my awareness. This is very difficult to describe. You really have to experience it for yourself. But the simplest way to say it is that light is you. And it's not you in the sense of your ego or who you perceive yourself to be with all of your flaws and sins and mistakes and identity traps. It's the you that's deeper than that. Real, whole, unattached, perfect, peaceful, secure, infinite, powerful. And imagine my surprise when, after all of the years of searching and loneliness and heartbreak and desperation and disillusionment, I found that the light was within me the whole time. One night, I walked outside after the kids were in bed, and I stood barefoot under the chokecherry tree in my front yard. And I went to that place of I am, very grounded in my body, and I practiced focusing my concentration. First on the sunset, then on the passing cars, then on the wind blowing the leaves of the tree that were surrounding me. And suddenly, I was there again, in that same world that I remembered as a baby, where everything was made of love. The trees were made of love, and the sunset was made of love, and the cars were made of love. And my awareness of those things was the light. And we can argue about the logistics of whether or not the light is me or whether or not the light is within me, but my experience of it was that my awareness was the light, and if there is any separation between my awareness and the light, it's indistinguishable. The light just is, and it is in me, and it is me, and I am that. And just why did no one tell me all of those years where to find the light that I was looking for? Well, maybe it's because I couldn't express what I was looking for first of all, but maybe it's just simply because nobody else knew where to find it either. I remember all the years that I used to talk about this to my little sister because she was the only one who understood about how I had to find God, and that if I looked with all of my heart, I was going to find him. And now I can say that I finally have, in a way that is so real and so fulfilling that there's nowhere else to look. If you seek God with all of your heart, you will find him, but you have to be willing to go where he leads, even if it's outside the confines or the boundaries of what your religious structure tells you is the right way or the only way. And everybody has to follow their own path, and I understand that people, just like I did, are going to look for God in all of the wrong places until they exhaust themselves. And that's part of the point of this whole life, is to experience that perceived separateness from God and learn how to find him within this illusion of separation. Let me shorten the search a little bit. God is within you. Christ is within you. God is within your awareness. You can look for God on a mountaintop or in a church building or in the Bible or in prayer and meditation or out in the wilderness somewhere. And you can learn incredible things about God and have incredible experiences with God in all of those places and through all of those means. But conceptual knowledge and emotional experiences are not God. The only place that you can find God in any real, satisfying, or lasting way is within. Most people within religious circles will hear that and say, how can you say that God is within me? What about my sins and my mistakes and my selfishness and my flaws? And aren't we supposed, doesn't the Bible say to crucify ourselves, less of me and more of you? Yes, but that's exactly what it's talking about, guys. That the less of me is less of my ego, less of the false me, and more of you is the more of God that is within you. So your sins and your mistakes and your selfishness and your pride, that's not you. That's what the apostles call the sin nature or the flesh nature, or what is most commonly referred to as the ego. That's what we're supposed to crucify. That's what we're supposed to get past, overcome, rise above, as Jesus demonstrated to us, so that we are left with nothing but the Spirit within. This journey of discovery for me has been very lonely in some aspects. And that's not a bad thing. That's oftentimes where the spiritual path leads. Recently, when listening to Aaron Abke's videos on Christian mysticism, I was made aware of the fact that there is a whole long, rich tradition of people called Christian mystics who have existed from the beginning of Christianity, who have often undergone severe persecution. And what really sets Christian mystics apart is that they, each in their own way, have discovered that God is within them. And that made me feel a little less alone and a little more validated in my experience. But for those of you who want to know, those who come and question on my channel, well, it sounds like you're teaching New Age and this is heresy and you're mixing Eastern philosophies in with Christianity. Although I don't like to take on labels, because oftentimes labels just become an ego trap that you begin to identify yourself with, and then it becomes restricting and limiting. But if you guys want a label for who I am and what I teach on this channel, it is Christian mysticism. God is not distant. God is not judging you. God is not outside of you anywhere. You don't have to find God. You don't have to attain God. You don't have to strive to please God. You don't have to travel the world or find the right church or spend hours in prayer and meditation to experience God. The sacred journey, as Dan Millman says, is within you. And all the searching you need to do is to silence your thoughts, to silence your ego identity or your flesh nature enough to realize that you already have and you already are everything that you are looking for. As Francis of Assisi said, who, by the way, was a Christian mystic, what we are looking for is what is looking. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.